when we say the word alien, this is the first image to come to your mind. It is the 2nd century. The Roman Empire is at the height of its power, and a writer named Lucian writes what we consider to probably be the first ever science fiction story. It describes a battle between the inhabitants of the moon and the sun, and some travelers who get whirlwinded up into the middle of this chaos to observe what's going on. The moon people were much like the barbarians, probably the way the Romans used to think about the barbarians back in the day. They were kind of chaotic, absurd-looking creatures. They had the head of a vulture, some of them. Some of them had strange armor. Some of them were part plant, part human. They were like natural creatures, but kind of mixed up. On the other side were the dwellers of the sun. And they were the idealized humanoids. They reminded them of all that was best in the Roman Empire. They were like the mythic characters of old, bright glowing bodies lit from within. Their forms were very coherent, unlike the chaotic forms of the moon dwellers. They seemed intentional and crafted, whereas the moon dwellers felt chaotic. And we see this kind of juxtaposition between these two places, which actually represented what maybe Lucian was thinking the world would look like. When he wrote this story, he wasn't really trying to write science fiction. What he was writing was a satire that was intended to mock all these people who come and tell tales of their great adventures and all the things that they'd done. Maybe even mocking some of the great myths of old where people traveled to different places. And he openly admitted it when he called it a true story. It was kind of winking at you. It was meant to be something that would be a satire, something that would play a joke on the people who would tell these elaborate stories. And it's really easy to dismiss a story like this because we've got strange creatures, we have impossible worlds, we have a war in space. All of it is obviously untrue, especially to the Roman mind of the day. And I think that was the point. Lucian wasn't trying to convince anyone at all that his story was real. In fact, he was trying to prove that you could tell stories that sounded really exciting and had nothing to do with being true at all. But then something unexpected happened. We started to ask a different question. What if they weren't stories at all? What if there was something out there in those far, flung-off spaces beyond? In 1901, H.G. Wells published a book called The First Men on the Moon. In it, he describes the adventures of two men who discover a way to make an anti-gravity film on a vessel that they use to propel themselves towards the moon. They find it a cold, dark, barren place until the sun starts to rise over the surface. And when it does, it springs to life with all these strange and absurd forms of plants and life that seems to be out of this world because it is out of this world. In the middle of their first day, they decide to go exploring. And as they go exploring, they discover that they are not alone on the moon. In fact, there are creatures that not only live on the moon, but actually live under the moon to keep from getting frozen during the cold, long nights. And when they take a look at them, they see that they're quite different from what we would expect. They called them Selenites after the Greek goddess for the moon. And when you look at these creatures, they were thin and fragile. They're like communal insects that live under the ground, and they have different castes, different groups of people who have even different body shapes in response to the kind of work and the kind of role that they fulfill in the kind of group hive where they live. Each one has a special purpose, and in fact, there's not really an individual among them, but they function together. It's a world where everything everything is rigid, it's set in order, and every cast does what they're supposed to do. And I feel like it's a bit of a reflection of some of the things that were going on in the time. So many more things were being mechanized. So many more people were slotting into more specialized jobs. And I think there was kind of a worry, there was a question in people's minds. Are we going to lose our individuality? Are we going to lose that sense of being self? Am I just a cog in the wheel? Am I just destined to be a drone for the rest of my life? H.G. Wells' Moon Men were a product of the questioning of the time. But just as questions and fears are taking hold, another idea emerged. While H.G. Wells was imagining what was going on the moon, another man was looking at Mars, and Percival Lowell had some very interesting thoughts. Percival Lowell was an American businessman, travel writer, and amateur astronomer. He was fascinated by the night sky, and he eventually built his own observatory, which is still in Flagstaff, Arizona to this day, just so that he could get a closer look at the planets. And as he began to observe, one planet in particular caught his attention, the planet Mars. And as he looked, he noticed something very strange. Through his telescope, it appeared as though there were straight lines appearing across the surface of Mars. And he spent 15 years charting each one of these lines because as he came to study them, he came to believe that they were a massive canal system that was designed by some ancient civilization that was able to channel water from the polar ice caps down to the rest of the province. But the other thing he noticed is that Mars was a dead planet. And as he looked at it, he began to wonder, what was life like back then? What was that civilization like? And he began to publish his thoughts and the things that he had observed as an astronomer when he started to make these maps. And he suggested that there might have been life on Mars. When these kind of ideas began to capture the interest, they were less of a might be, and what if they really were? And writers all around the world began to ask new questions. If Mars has life, what does it look like? And over time, Martians became simpler, smaller, and easier to recognize at a glance. They were green, they had antenna, and they shrank into something almost cartoonish, and they became what we now iconically call little green men. And they appeared everywhere. Magazine covers, comic strips, and even cartoons like Marvin the Martian appeared on television and in theaters where people began to watch them. And as science had suggested life, culture had run away with that suggestion, and storytelling gave a face to what science had posited. Now, nobody thought there were really Martians, were they? And then all of a sudden, there was a shift. Aliens were no longer satire or fiction. They became a possibility. And the question still lingers today. What if Lowell wasn't entirely wrong, just early? Percival Lowell imagined a dying Mars, yet it was a Mars that was coming together to survive, a civilization of engineers, thinkers, and people who cooperated with each other. But the next vision we have of Mars is going to be quite a little bit different. In A Princess of Mars, Edgar Rice Burroughs imagined a planet that wasn't united at all. Mars, or Barsoom as it is called in his series, is dying. But instead of cooperation, it is fractured and at war. The seas are gone, the cities are in ruins, and the remaining people are broken into tribes. And among the most feared of these tribes are the Tharks, towering over 3 meters tall, green-skinned, 4 arms, running into battle, ready to fight at a moment's notice. They hatch from eggs. They don't raise families. They don't even value love. Only strength is what they value. This is no longer Lowell's careful, intelligent Mars. This is survival. And yet, they aren't mindless. They have rules, they have honor, and they can change. With leaders like Tarkus, Burroughs shows us something new. Aliens who are not truly alien, but still understandable. This time, Mars isn't something that we see through a telescope. It's a world we can stand on, we can fight on, we can conquer. And that changes everything. Because once we imagine humans surviving on Mars, there's even more unsettling thoughts that follow. What if Mars and Martians didn't stay on Mars? Because the next time we meet Martians, they won't be tribes, they won't be understandable, and they definitely won't be friendly. At the end of the 19th century, the idea of life on Mars was already becoming quite popular, but H.G. Wells took that idea and turned it into something terrifying. In War of the Worlds, the Martians didn't come as explorers or ambassadors, they came as conquerors. The story begins with cylinders falling to the earth, creating great craters in the ground. Heat around these cylinders from their re-entry into the atmosphere felt so strong that people could not get forward close enough to them. And then, as one of the cylinders unscrews, they witness this creature that comes out. It's all brain and tentacles and moves slowly across the ground. They don't know what's going on at first, but then towering tripods loomed above the surface, marching at a slow pace, sending a heat wave ahead of them, burning and destroying everything in their path. Cities were covered with smoke. This wasn't a battle. It was complete and utter domination. But the real horror isn't how they attacked. It was that humans weren't seen as enemies. In fact, humans weren't seen as anything except animals to be destroyed and stepped over on their path to conquest. And H.G. Wells turned what was happening in his world upside down, and for once, humanity was not the conquerors. They were those who were being conquered, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. Armies failed, weapons failed. Everything that we tried to build against them did not succeed, and civilization began to collapse. Until the very end, the Martians were defeated, not by our great wisdom, not by our great strength, but by tiny bacteria that they had no resistance to. Life on Earth proved stronger than intelligence and technology of machines from afar. It's a chilling idea. Not that the aliens could destroy us, but they might look at us as the same ways we looked at others that we were conquering, and not to even think twice before moving forward over top of us. In War of the Worlds, the fear was simple. Aliens invade, aliens conquer, and humanity fails. But what if invasion doesn't look like war? What if it looks more like silence, missing time, or memories that you can't quite trust? Wells imagined aliens as conquerors, but modern cultures imagine something far more terrifying. Not invaders, observers. You know what they look like. You may have even seen them in your nightmares. And when we say the word alien, This is the first image to come to your mind. They are instantly recognizable across many cultures. Uncanny proportions, oversized heads, large almond-shaped black eyes, small mouth, and almost non-existent nose. But it isn't their appearance that troubles us the most. It's their behavior. They are clinical. They have no emotion or compassion. They communicate telepathically. They're associated with abduction and experimentation on human beings. They are collectors, not conquerors. Yet. Why do they make us so fearful? Why do they make us so anxious? Well, we can feel them watching us, and we ask ourselves, what are they really up to? What's really going on behind the scenes? They show up without warning. They go to lonely places. They abduct people against their will. And while we are in their thrall, there is nothing we can do to stop them. They can do anything they like. And we have no control over our own destiny. They experiment on humans while we are unable to defend ourselves. They are raw intelligence without empathy. And maybe what unsettles us most is that the gray alien doesn't ask, what if we're alone? It asks something far worse. What if we are unimportant? For thousands of years, humanity has looked to the stars and asked one question: are we alone? Science fiction imagined aliens arriving in countless ways. Some come as explorers, some come as conquerors. They arrive with fleets, heat rays, giant machines. But what if the most successful alien invasion didn't look like an invasion at all? Think about it. How do you conquer an entire planet without firing a shot, without destroying a single city, without anyone even realizing that they had already lost? That is the brilliant idea at the heart of the movie, Stargate. Ra never launched an invasion on Earth. There are no cities burning, no desperate last stand, no war for humanity's survival. By the time the story begins, the conquest is already over. Ra had arrived thousands of years earlier, taken a human host, and used technology so advanced it appeared to be divine. He doesn't ask humanity to surrender, he simply gives them a reason to kneel. But why would an advanced alien bother pretending to be a god? Ra's greatest weapon isn't the staff that he carries, it's the illusion he creates about who he is. Ra doesn't just rule Egypt, he shapes the way the people understand reality. Through temples, symbols, and rituals, every part of society reinforces his authority. He changes the way they believe because he knows belief is far more powerful than fear. Fear controls people for a moment. Belief can control civilization for centuries. But if Ra's power comes from convincing humans that he's a god, what exactly is he hiding? Ra isn't simply an alien ruler. He is Goa'uld, a parasitic creature that survives by living inside a human host. Suddenly, the invasion becomes deeply personal. The enemy isn't standing outside the city walls. He's looking back at you through human eyes. The body survives, the mind does not. The greatest invasion isn't an army crossing across your borders. It's losing control of yourself. The most terrifying thing about Ra isn't that he came from the stars. It's that he understood humanity better than humanity understood itself. Across this series, we've watched the alien evolve from strange civilizations to Martian invaders to mysterious visitors. Each reflected the fears of its own generation. But Ra introduced something different. The most successful conqueror doesn't destroy civilization. He becomes part of it. And maybe that's why Ra still feels so unsettling today, because the greatest threat was never that aliens would arrive from the stars. It was the possibility that we'd welcome them and never realize we'd already surrendered.